My name is Elle Johnson, and I'm a TV writer and showrunner and executive producer. I've been working as a television writer for the last 20 something years, primarily doing cop shows, but other character driven shows as well. And I most recently finished working on a television series for Amazon called Bosch. And I also worked on a limited series with Octavia Spencer called Self-Made, inspired by the life of Madam C.J. Walker. So I was really grateful for the opportunity to consider equality, because when I stopped to think about it, I realized that I didn't really know what equality looked like. And I was racking my brain trying to remember my experiences with equality, or rather inequality, in my life. And I remembered one experience that I had working on a television show where, similar to Nakai, I realized that the guy in the exact same position as I was, with the same title, doing the same job, was getting paid more than me. And my thoughts of complaining about it were soon wiped away as I inventoried for myself how much better a writer I thought he was than I, more naturally talented, a faster writer, maybe a more inventive storyteller. And that this was, looking back on it, I realized this was perhaps my way of kind of avoiding the confrontation that I knew I should have, but that I didn't think would go the way I wanted, that I was kind of convincing myself that he deserved to be paid more, so that I wouldn't have to confront a situation that I felt like I couldn't actually change. And thinking about this kind of opened the floodgates to me of other instances of dealing with equality or inequality. I remembered how early on in my career, I decided to leave the talent agency that was representing me. And they proceeded to tell me that I would be sorry, that others who had left had never worked again. And they continued to say that one of the only reasons that I got work was because I was Black and because I was a woman, as if pointing this out to me would somehow make me want to stay with the agency. But as I reflected on this back then and even now, I realized the truth is that I've only ever been hired because I was Black or a woman or both. That in many ways I was filling slots that needed to be filled. I was checking off boxes. Because usually on a television show, there would maybe be a Black character or a female character in the main cast that they felt needed to be serviced with an authentic voice. And that would be filled by one person. You know, you typically, I found early on in my career, especially working on cop shows and procedurals, I would be the only woman in the room and the only person of color, and that you would never kind of see other people that looked like you. There would only ever be one. There would never be another one. I was thinking about how early on in my career, again, there was a particular show where one of the Black actors specifically asked for a writer of color to be added to the staff. And, you know, this actor had been on the show for a while and had gained the trust and you know, the ear of the people in charge. And I was really grateful for the opportunity just to fill that slot. It was one of many crime shows that I'd worked on. But even though more than 85% of the people in Americans' prisons are people of color, it feels like on television, they make up less than 2% of the stories being told, as if somehow, you know, those stories are less worthy than telling stories about the typical demographic of a super rich white person who murders someone or gets into trouble. So when I was asked to join the show, I made it a point in my head to tell stories only about Black characters. I made sure that all of the episodes that I wrote involved Black characters and would have predominantly Black casts. And I felt like, you know, this was kind of my duty to do this. And it was my honor to do this, to tell stories about people that I wanted to see reflected on television. And I remember on one episode where I managed to make every single character in the cast a person of color. And as we were casting, sitting there with the director and other producers, you know, at the end of the day, looking at all of the headshots of the people that we had cast and kind of looking at who we had, I remember the director on this particular episode just made an offhanded comment that this episode sure did have a lot of Black actors in it. And I wondered if he ever would have said that looking at the headshots of any of the other episodes, would he ever had said, boy, this episode sure does have a lot of white actors in it? And I realized probably not. I realized that had I not been there, this disparity and inequality might never have been noticed before. So I've been grateful for the opportunities that I've had in some small way to level the playing field. And as I said, I know for most of my career, when I've been hired, it's because I am Black and because I am a woman. That's for the first time I've been hired. By the second or third or fourth time that I'm hired by these same producers and showrunners on other shows, it's because they've worked with me before and they know how good I actually am. And it's hard for me to kind of say that out loud because I feel like it's easy for me as a creative person to see my flaws and my faults. And that's when I kind of kick things into high gear in terms of working twice as hard to get twice as good, so opportunities will come to me. And I acknowledge this inequality, that this is kind of an old trope, you know, the idea of having to work twice as hard to get half as much. I feel like I have internalized this to a degree where I don't resent it. You know, I feel like that's just the way it is. And sometimes I'm even wearing that as a badge of honor. I feel like, oh, it makes me stronger. It makes me a better writer, even if I'm not being appropriately compensated for it. So in a bizarre kind of way, I feel like looking at inequality, I feel like I am equally confident and insecure. I at once know my worth and at the same time feel like I'm not valued in the marketplace. So about 4 or 5 years ago, something happened in my career. Suddenly, there were a lot more projects about people of color, Black people in particular, and women and minority showrunners were in demand, and there just weren't enough of us to fill those slots because we'd not been cultivated to the same degree. We'd not been given the same opportunities. But suddenly, after 20 plus years in the industry, I finally had multiple offers to run shows, but only certain shows. I wasn't being asked to run shows that featured white leads, only shows that were telling quote unquote Black stories. And while it's great to be able to finally tell our stories, I want to be able to tell all stories. Even though I feel like I've been hired for the most part to service Black characters on a show, I'm writing for all characters on these shows. And since my career has been largely writing cop shows and procedurals, I have to acknowledge that if I weren't writing for largely white men, I wouldn't have a career. So this brought me back to the question of, is this equality? You know, this still feels kind of like separate, but not really equal. And these days I have a number of white writer friends who complain about how hard it is for them to get staff. Now, I don't know how true it is. It seems to me that there's still a hell of a lot of shows out there that are featuring mainly white characters, but I'm sympathetic because they're experiencing what I've experienced. And I don't wish that on anyone. As many of the Black activists have graciously said in this moment of social justice reckoning, we want equality, not revenge. So what the hell is equality? Equality is when anyone can write anything because everything is being written and has an equal chance of getting on air, when all of our stories are considered valid, when we all just want to be known and seen for who we are, and not as an exception or an outlier. Equality is when we can tell all of our specific stories and recognize what is universally human and relatable in all of them, that we're all here having a human experience. And I feel like now is the moment to demand equal treatment, equal time. Right now, the pendulum has to swing wide and far before it can come back to rest in a place of balance. And I feel like we're going through an uncomfortable period of these conversations and kind of acknowledging what hasn't been said and done before, but that hopefully openly talking about these things and really pushing things to the limit will get us eventually to a place of equality and ultimately balance.